Hello, I'm Robert Alt, president of the Buckeye Institute and a contributor to National Review. I'm here today with Hans von Spakovsky, senior legal fellow at the Heritage Foundation and co-author with John Fund of Who's Counting? How Fraudsters and Bureaucrats Put Your Vote at Risk. Thank you for being with me today, Hans.
Happy to talk to you, Robert.
So, in your book, you warn about the dangers of fraud and bureaucratic incompetence, particularly in close elections, and the potential that the 2012 election could be another Bush versus Gore-style recount debacle. The polls currently show President Obama and Governor Romney at a dead heat in Ohio. Does Ohio have the potential to be the next Florida?
It certainly does. I mean, one reason, obviously, because it's a battleground state. Right now, as you say, the two candidates are tied very closely, but also because it's got problems with both its voter registration system and problems with things like a very weak voter ID law.
Has there been any history of voter fraud in Ohio? We've heard it repeated over and over again that there simply is no such thing as voter fraud.
Well, yeah, in fact, just this past week, 3 Ohio residents were indicted for double voting. They voted twice under slightly different names. They were registered twice, their names varied just a little bit, and they used that to double vote. In 2008, almost a dozen staffers for the Ohio campaign of Barack Obama were actually indicted for voter fraud. Why? Well, because they were out-of-state residents. They were sent to Ohio just for the purposes of working on the campaign, but they took advantage of an early voting and registration law that Ohio had to get registered. And some of them actually voted, others requested absentee ballots to vote, even though they really weren't residents of the state.
But Ohio has a voter ID law. Isn't that sufficient to address some of this in-person voter impersonation?
Well, but the problem is Ohio does not require a government-issued photo ID. It allows other documents, such as a utility bill, to be used. And for anybody who thinks that a utility bill might be a problem, all they have to do is look at the new undercover video that was just released by Project Veritas, James O'Keefe, that shows the son of a Virginia member of Congress instructing an undercover operative how he can vote in the names of other people in Virginia. And because Virginia also allows utility bills, he basically tells them, listen, utility bills are easy to forge. You can do it using Microsoft Word in your computer.
Recently, Clear Channel made the decision to pull down billboards in Ohio that simply stated that voter fraud is a felony. Do signs like this constitute voter suppression?
No, of course not. And in fact, that shows, frankly, how nutty people on the left side of the political aisle have gotten. Look, in 1965, we were battling real attempts to keep people out of the polls. We don't have that kind of thing going on today. And the idea that simply telling people that, voter fraud is a felony and citing the law about that, that's somehow going to keep people out of the polls, that's voter suppression, I mean, that's ridiculous. I mean, the only thing that might do, hopefully, is deter people who intended to cheat, like the 3 people that were just arrested in Ohio for double voting.
It's frequently argued, though, that the use of a number of these precautions by states such as voter ID disenfranchise voters. At this point, we've had voter ID laws on the books for something like 5 years. What does the actual experience show in terms of voter turnout in the states that have utilized voter ID?
Well, the experience of those states, particularly Georgia and Indiana, shows that it does not suppress turnout. Georgia has a very large African-American population. It's about a quarter of the state. And in 2008, when their photo ID law was in place for the first time, the turnout of African-Americans went up dramatically. Now, the turnout of African-Americans was up across the country, but it increased at a larger rate in Georgia than many other states without a photo ID. Same thing happened in 2010. Indiana had a similar experience. They had a huge increase in turnout, particularly of Democratic turnout, in 2008 when the photo ID law was in place for the first time. And I mean, for those who say, this is somehow intended to suppress Democratic votes, keep Barack Obama from getting reelected, I would point out that in 2008, when Indiana's photo ID law was in place for the first time, a law that the Supreme Court, U.S. Supreme Court said was the strictest photo ID law in the country, Barack Obama won Indiana. He was the first Democrat to win the state since the 1960s.
One last question. If you were an Ohioan and you were concerned about potential voter ID, I know that you're actually an election official in Virginia. What is it you would advise Ohioans to do in terms of what should they be doing on Election Day?
Well, actually, the best thing that an ordinary citizen can do is volunteer to be an election official. County governments are always looking for people to work in the polls on Election Day. They're always short. And getting a job like that, it's a long day, the pay isn't very good, but by working as an election official, you will be there to make sure that the laws are followed and nothing is going on that shouldn't be under the law. If you don't have the time to do that, don't have the ability to do that, be a poll watcher. Represent one of the candidates you like or the political party that you like. Be a poll watcher so that you can be there to monitor and observe the polls and report on any illegal or unlawful activities that are going on. That's a great way of participating in the election process and trying to be sure that we have a fair election.
Thank you, Hans, and thank you for joining me. For those of you who would like more information about the battleground issues going on in Ohio, please come to buckeyeinstitute.org.